What if everything you've been chasing, peace, purpose, power, was never outside you, but buried beneath who you were told to be? This audiobook isn't self-help. It's self-reclamation. Strip away the noise. Remember your truth. Your true self is waiting, and it's unstoppable. Introduction. What if I told you that the life you're living right now, yes, this very moment, is a fraction of the life that's possible for you? That the self you show the world is only a shadow of the self that's waiting to emerge? There is something buried beneath the masks you wear, behind the roles you perform, beyond the noise of the world and the expectations that shape you. That something is your true self, and it's been calling you all along. You've felt it in the quiet moments, in the middle of the night, when the noise dies down and the ache returns. You've felt it in the dissatisfaction you can't quite explain, in the longing you can't silence, in the question that won't stop haunting you. Is this really all there is? We are living in a time of radical awakening, a collective unraveling of everything we were taught to be. Old paradigms are crumbling. Success without fulfillment is no longer enough. Perfection without peace is being exposed for the illusion it is. More than ever, people are searching for something real, something raw, rooted, and meaningful. This book matters now because you are being asked to remember who you truly are, not the version of you the world rewarded, not the one you constructed for survival, but the one beneath it all. And here's the truth. Reclaiming your true self isn't just an act of personal empowerment. It's a revolutionary act. Because when one person steps fully into who they are, they unconsciously give others permission to do the same. Imagine what would change if more people lived from their essence, not their wounds. What would shift in your relationships, your work, your joy, your peace? That's what this audiobook will guide you to discover. Not someday, but now. What true self really means. Your true self is not something you have to build. It's not a project. It's not a performance. It's not the curated identity you show on social media. It's not the high-achieving persona you wear like armor to earn love and validation. Your true self is who you were before the world told you who to be. It's the core of you that never changes, even as the outer world shifts. It's your rawest essence, unfiltered, whole, powerful, wise, the part of you that already knows. But here's the catch. Most of us have buried our true selves under layers of conditioning, trauma, people-pleasing, self-doubt, and shame. We traded authenticity for approval. We silenced our intuition to avoid judgment. We became who we thought we needed to be to survive, and in the process, we forgot. This audiobook is a process of remembering, of coming back home to yourself, of peeling away everything that is not you, so what remains is the undeniable magnetic truth of who you are. And when you live from that truth, you stop chasing your worth. You stop abandoning yourself for others. You stop settling for a life that feels almost right. Instead, you rise. You become grounded, present, powerful, not because of what you've done, but because of who you've become. Your true self is not an idea. It's not a buzzword. It's a lived experience. It's what happens when your inner world and outer expression finally align. And in that alignment, everything changes. How to use this audiobook. Journaling, reflection pauses. This is not a book you just listen to. It's an experience you immerse yourself in. You will not be the same person at the end of this journey as you are now. That is a promise. But transformation doesn't happen through passive consumption. It happens through active participation. So here's how to get the most out of this audiobook. Carve out intentional space when you listen. Turn off distractions. Listen with a journal nearby. Throughout each chapter, there will be reflection pauses and questions designed to crack you open, to challenge you, awaken you, and invite you deeper. Don't rush past them. Sit with them. Let the questions work you. Let your answers surprise you. They're often the key to unlocking what's been hidden. You may feel resistance. That's normal. In fact, it's a sign that you're on the right path. When your mind protests, when your body tenses, when the excuses arise, pause and lean in. Transformation lives just beyond that edge. Revisit chapters often. Healing and growth are non-linear. What doesn't land the first time may crack you open the fifth. Use this book as a mirror, a companion, a guide back to your own soul. Let your journal become the sacred ground where your true self begins to speak. And most importantly, give yourself grace. This journey is not about fixing yourself. It's about reclaiming what was never broken in the first place. You're not broken. You're becoming. You are not broken. You are becoming. Read that again. Let it sink in. You were never meant to be perfect. You were meant to evolve. Every painful chapter, every failure, every detour you judged as wrong, it was all a part of your becoming. Society taught you to hide your mess, to present only the polished version. But here's the truth. Your power is not in your perfection. It's in your presence, in your ability to stay with yourself through the storm, in your willingness to rise without needing to erase your past. The cracks in your armor? That's where the light gets in. That's where the truth begins to speak. Your self-doubt, your anxiety, your inner critic, they're not enemies. They're signals, messengers, invitations to look deeper, to ask better questions, to offer yourself what the world could not. This journey is not about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before the world made you forget. And you do not walk it alone. With every word in this audiobook, you'll feel less isolated and more seen, more understood, more alive. You'll begin to realize the thing you've been searching for out there, it's already inside you, buried beneath the noise, waiting to be reclaimed. So if you're ready to stop performing and start living, if you're ready to stop fixing and start reclaiming, then this is your moment. The true you is not a fantasy. It is your birthright, and you don't need to earn it. You just need to say yes. Say yes to the voice that's whispering, "This isn't who I really am." Say yes to the wild, messy, magnificent journey back home to your soul. Say yes to your true self, because you're not broken. You're becoming, and the world needs the real you more than ever. Chapter 1. The Great Forgetting Childhood Innocence and the Original Self. There is a time, fleeting and precious, when we are untouched by the expectations of the world. A sacred space within the early years of our lives where wonder reigns, imagination flows like a river without banks, and the sense of self is unencumbered, alive and whole. In this raw, innocent beginning, we know ourselves not by name or achievements, but by a profound sense of being. A child does not question their worth. It is intrinsic, unshaken by approval or rejection. They dance when they feel joy, cry when they are sad, and ask endless questions, not to impress, but to understand. This is the original self, intuitive, expressive, fully embodied in the now. It is a version of us that doesn't yet know how to shrink, mold, or compromise. We are born with this essence, authentic, open-hearted, and divinely attuned to life. In those unguarded moments of laughter and curiosity, we are closer to our soul than perhaps at any other point in life. But inevitably, slowly and subtly, the world begins to shape us. It comes in the form of praise and punishment, through the anxious glance of a parent, a teacher's disapproving tone, or the unspoken rules of culture that reward conformity over curiosity. We are praised for being good, for coloring inside the lines, for being quiet, polite, controllable. And we are corrected, sometimes sharply, when we venture outside of the acceptable margins. The child eager for love and approval, begins to adapt. Each adaptation, while seemingly harmless, chips away at the unfiltered self, replacing authenticity with acceptability. We learn that certain emotions are bad, that certain dreams are unrealistic, and that love, more often than not, must be earned. The layers of social conditioning. As the years progress, the process of forgetting our true self deepens and becomes more ingrained. Social conditioning begins to wrap around us like invisible armor, not only shielding us from judgment, but also separating us from who we truly are. Society teaches us that our value lies in what we do, what we own, how we appear, and who approves of us. The school system prioritizes obedience over creativity, memorization over exploration, and achievement over presence. We are rewarded not for knowing ourselves, but for knowing the rules of the game. In this environment, we learn to suppress spontaneity and trade our curiosity for compliance. By the time we enter adolescence, most of us have already crafted versions of ourselves designed to survive in a world that values performance over presence. We create masks, identities forged not from the soul, but from the desire to be accepted, admired, or at least left alone. These masks vary in shape and intent. The high achiever, the peacemaker, the rebel, the invisible one, the clown, the perfectionist. Each role we play is both a survival mechanism and a silent betrayal of our deeper truth. The true self, once vibrant and expressive, becomes buried beneath layers of social identity, fear-based decisions, and external validations. And while these adaptations may help us gain approval, avoid rejection, or earn a sense of control, they also create a growing chasm between who we are and who we present to the world. We become so accustomed to these roles that eventually we forget they are masks at all. They begin to feel real. We convince ourselves that this curated identity is who I am, not realizing that the authentic self, brilliant, messy, intuitive, is still alive beneath the surface, waiting for permission to reemerge. Emotional imprints and the formation of the false self. Beyond social structures, it is our emotional experiences, particularly those of wounding, fear, and unmet needs, that most powerfully shape the false self. Each emotionally charged moment leaves an imprint, a narrative, a belief that we internalize, often unconsciously. When we feel rejected, even as children, we may begin to believe, I am not enough. When our emotions are dismissed or ridiculed, we might adopt the belief, my feelings are dangerous, or vulnerability is weakness. These beliefs don't remain as fleeting thoughts. They embed into the fabric of our identity, driving our decisions, shaping our relationships, and reinforcing the persona we construct to feel safe. Over time, the false self becomes an elaborate response to emotional pain. If love was conditional, we become people pleasers. If anger was punished, we become appeasers. If authenticity was met with shame, we become performers. And while the false self may bring short-term safety, it always comes at the cost of long-term peace. We lose access to our intuition, creativity, and inner voice because we've trained ourselves to suppress anything that threatens the illusion we've constructed. The most painful part of this process is that it happens quietly. There is no moment when we consciously decide to abandon ourselves. It happens gradually, through 1,000 small concessions, until we wake up one day feeling like strangers to ourselves. We wonder why we're exhausted, why our relationships feel hollow, why our accomplishments ring empty. And yet, the true self is never fully lost. It is simply hidden, masked beneath the protective scaffolding we've built. The soul does not die. It waits, it watches, it whispers, and at some point, for those willing to listen, it calls us back, the consequences of separation from self. The longer we live disconnected from our authentic self, the deeper the inner void becomes. This is not always visible on the outside. Many people who appear successful, confident, even joyful, are living from a self that has been curated, not cultivated. They know how to meet expectations, but they do not know how to meet themselves. The disconnection manifests subtly at first, a sense of restlessness, dissatisfaction, or quiet yearning for something more. We might distract ourselves with busyness, numb ourselves with entertainment, or chase achievement after achievement in hopes that fulfillment will finally catch up. But it never does, because fulfillment cannot be found in what is acquired, only in what is remembered. The true self does not crave achievement. It craves alignment. It does not seek validation. It seeks expression. And when we are separated from it, we experience a profound loneliness. Not the loneliness of being without others, but the loneliness of being without ourselves. This is the core ache of disconnection. It is a spiritual homesickness, a longing to return to the wholeness we once knew as children. This inner exile can lead to depression, anxiety, burnout, and even physical illness, all of which are not simply afflictions to be medicated, but messengers to be understood. They are signals from the soul, alerting us that we've strayed too far from our essence. True healing begins not with fixing ourselves, but with finding ourselves, beneath the conditioning, beyond the wounds, and within the sacred stillness that we have forgotten how to enter. It requires courage, the courage to question who we've become, and curiosity to rediscover who we were before the world told us who to be. But once we begin the journey back, everything changes. The masks begin to fall. The inner voice grows louder. Life, once muted, becomes vivid again. And we realize that the greatest loss was never time, opportunity, or success. It was the loss of our own reflection, obscured beneath layers of trying, performing, and pretending. But the beauty of the human spirit is that it remembers. Even after decades of disconnect, it remembers the sound of truth. It remembers the freedom of authenticity. And it waits, patiently, lovingly, for the day we choose to remember too. Chapter 2. The False Self. The Birth of the Mask. The formation of the false self is not an act of deception or conscious manipulation. It is an act of survival, of adaptation, of learning how to exist in a world that rewards performance and punishes authenticity. As children, we quickly learn which parts of us are celebrated and which parts are ignored, shamed, or punished. The mask we create is not born of malice but of necessity. It begins subtly with a raised eyebrow when we speak too loudly, a disappointed tone when we express anger, a withdrawal of affection when we cry too often or ask for too much. Over time, these micro-moments create macro decisions deep within our psyche. We decide, often without words, that to be accepted, we must hide. And so we begin to wear the first layers of the mask. We smile when we are sad. We nod when we disagree. We become helpful to feel needed. We succeed to feel loved. The mask grows as we grow, becoming more sophisticated, more polished, more believable. It is carefully crafted from the expectations of our caregivers, teachers, peers, and society at large. It becomes our armor, our interface with the world, and eventually our identity. We forget that it is a mask. We come to believe that we are the one who always says yes, the one who never cries, the one who has it all together. But behind that mask lives a self that is unexpressed, unseen, and often unheard. A self longing not for applause, but for acknowledgement. The roles we inhabit. As the mask solidifies, it fractures into roles, personas that serve a purpose, but often distance us further from our essence. These roles are not chosen consciously, but rather assumed as responses to the environments in which we find ourselves. The high achiever, for instance, learns early on that praise and love are contingent upon performance. This role becomes adept at success, striving relentlessly, always reaching for the next milestone, the next affirmation, never allowing failure to threaten the illusion of worth. Then there is the caretaker, whose value comes from being needed, from putting others first, often to the point of self-neglect. This role finds purpose in self-sacrifice, in anticipating the needs of others, but silently suffers when reciprocity never arrives. The perfectionist fears judgment so deeply that they strive for flawlessness, believing that if everything is done just right, they can escape criticism. And then there is the chameleon, the shapeshifter, who molds themselves to fit the energy of the room, losing themselves in the process of belonging. Each of these roles is built on a brilliant form of emotional intelligence. They are strategies that kept us safe, accepted, and even loved. But they are also cages. While these roles may serve us for a time, they eventually become prisons. We begin to feel restless, resentful, or exhausted, not fully understanding why. We may even succeed in the eyes of the world, yet feel hollow on the inside, as if our life is being lived by someone else. That someone else is the false self, a collection of personas performing a story we never truly wrote. Disconnection from authentic desires. One of the most insidious consequences of the false self is how it severs us from our true desires. When we live according to roles and expectations, we begin to suppress the voice of our inner knowing. Over time, we lose clarity on what we truly want because we've spent years pursuing what we believed we should want. We may find ourselves climbing ladders we never intended to climb, chasing relationships that mimic old wounds, or committing to careers that drain rather than nourish us. The voice of the true self becomes faint, buried beneath a chorus of external opinions. What will they think? Takes precedence over, what do I feel? The question is no longer, what brings me joy, but what will earn me approval? In this state, even pleasure becomes performative, even rest becomes strategic. We might check all the boxes: good job, stable home, respectable relationships, only to feel like something essential is missing. That something is self. When we are disconnected from authentic desire, life feels like a script rather than a song. There is a dullness, a grayness, an emotional flatline that cannot be corrected by simply rearranging external circumstances. The answer lies within, in reawakening the part of us that knows what it means to be alive, to feel lit up by purpose, moved by beauty, and grounded in integrity. But to do so, we must dismantle the scaffolding of the false self, which can feel terrifying, even disorienting. It requires courage to admit that the life we've built may not be rooted in truth. It requires humility to question long-held dreams. And it requires patience to sit in the void that emerges when we stop pretending and start listening. The longing beneath the performance. Despite the effectiveness of our masks and roles, a persistent longing lingers beneath them, a subtle ache, an inner unrest that calls out in quiet moments. It speaks not in language, but in feelings. The anxiety that accompanies stillness, the sadness that bubbles up in silence, the exhaustion that no amount of sleep can fix. This longing is not weakness, it is wisdom. It is the soul reminding us that we were never meant to live in exile from ourselves. It is the call to return, not to what was, but to what is real. And yet, this return is not easy. The false self does not dissolve with a single revelation. It resists, it rationalizes, it defends its place. After all, it has protected us, it has helped us belong. And so the journey home is not about violently ripping off the mask, but gently laying it down. It is about honoring the roles we played and then choosing to release them when they no longer serve. It is not about shame or self-blame, but about compassion and curiosity. Who am I without this role? What do I need when I'm not trying to impress, please, or control? These are questions the true self longs to answer, but only when we create space to hear it. And in that space, something beautiful begins to unfold. We start to notice glimmers of authenticity, moments when we speak without filter, laugh without constraint, create without comparison. These moments are the breadcrumbs that lead us back to our essence. They are reminders that beneath the performance lies a presence so profound, so alive, that it cannot be faked or fabricated. It can only be felt. And once felt, it becomes undeniable. The more we connect with this truth, the less tolerable the false self becomes. Not because it is evil, but because it is insufficient. It is too small for the soul. And when the soul is ready to expand, no amount of pretending can contain it. Chapter 3. The Inner Whisper Signs You're Ready to Awaken. There comes a moment in life, often subtle, sometimes startling, when the external world begins to lose its grip on us. The titles, the accomplishments, the carefully curated roles and routines begin to feel hollow, like a song played too many times, once beautiful, but now strangely out of tune. We wake up one day and realize we're tired in a way that rest doesn't repair, disoriented by the lives we've built, and increasingly unsure whether the path we're on was truly chosen or merely inherited. This moment is not a crisis in the way the world might define it. It is an awakening, a quiet but powerful turning point where something deeper begins to stir beneath the surface of ordinary life. It might show up as persistent dissatisfaction despite everything appearing fine, or a growing discomfort with the conversations we once enjoyed and the spaces we once sought. Sometimes it emerges through the shock of loss, heartbreak, or failure, those life quakes that dismantle our illusions and shake loose what no longer belongs. But more often, it begins with a whisper, a gentle but insistent sense that there must be more than this, more than endless striving, more than constant pleasing, more than the anxious effort to hold together an identity that never quite fits. These are not random frustrations. They are signs. They are sacred symptoms of your soul beginning to stretch, reaching for the surface after years, perhaps decades, of being buried. And if you are sensing this whisper, this strange blend of restlessness and yearning, you are not broken. You are waking up. You are beginning to remember that underneath all the layers of performance and protection lives a self that was never lost, only quieted. A self that knows peace, that longs for purpose, that is ready, finally, to be reclaimed. Listening to the voice within, learning to hear the voice of your inner self, is not about discovering something new. It is about unlearning everything that taught you to stop listening. The inner voice is not loud. It does not compete with the constant noise of the world or the harsh narrative of the inner critic. It speaks in sensations, nudges, knowing. It communicates through the body, the gut, the heart, a subtle contraction when something feels wrong, a quiet expansion when something aligns with your truth. This voice was once your native language, spoken fluently in childhood when imagination flowed freely and choices were made from joy, not obligation. But as we absorbed the voices of others, the directives of parents, the teachings of school, the conditioning of culture, we slowly replaced our inner guidance with external expectations. The voice within was silenced, not by force but by forgetting. To hear it again, we must practice remembering. This remembering happens in stillness, in solitude, in spaces where we allow ourselves to be unproductive, unfiltered, unhurried. It happens in journaling before the mind has time to edit, in nature walks where the wind carries insights, not spoken in words, in quiet moments of heartbreak or awe that crack open the hardened shell of identity. The inner voice will not shout over your distractions. It waits for your willingness. And when you begin to honor it, when you choose to trust the pull toward something, or the inexplicable resistance to what seems logical, it begins to grow louder. It begins to lead. Listening to the voice within is not about abandoning reason. It is about integrating intuition. It is remembering that beneath the cleverness of your mind lies a deeper wisdom, one that does not need proof to speak the truth, The more you honor it, the more you realize it has always been there, patiently guiding, quietly offering, lovingly waiting. Your soul's desire for authenticity. At the heart of the inner whisper is your soul's deep desire to be seen, not for who you've become in the eyes of others, but for who you've always been beneath the noise. This desire is not egoic, it is existential. It is not a craving for attention, but a call for alignment. The soul does not want to impress, outperform, or persuade. It wants to express, embody, and expand. It longs to be free from the suffocating constraints of who you think you have to be, so it can finally become what it truly is. This longing often begins as subtle discomfort, an inexplicable aversion to things you used to tolerate, a rising unease in spaces where you used to fit in. You may find yourself withdrawing from certain conversations, craving solitude, reevaluating relationships that once felt fulfilling. This is not regression, it is refinement. Your soul is reclaiming its space. It no longer has the tolerance for small talk that lacks depth, for obligations that require self-abandonment, or for roles that reduce your infinite complexity to a single label. You may feel guilty at first, even selfish. After all, the false self was designed to please, to perform, to ensure you belonged. But this guilt is not a sign you're doing something wrong. It is evidence that you are breaking an old agreement, one in which you traded authenticity for acceptance. And in breaking it, you begin to make a new one, with yourself. The soul does not negotiate in logic. It communicates in resonance. When something resonates, when it lights you up, when it softens your edges or brings tears to your eyes for reasons you can't explain, that is your soul speaking. It is showing you what is true, what is yours, what is real. And in listening, you do not become someone new. You return to who you were before the world told you who to be. Embracing the discomfort of growth. Awakening to your inner truth is not a gentle linear path. It is a dismantling, a shedding, a sacred disorientation. There is no way to awaken without disrupting the systems, internal and external, that were built to sustain the false self. And so, as the whisper grows louder, as your inner voice begins to reclaim its rightful place, you will be asked to let go. Let go of relationships built on versions of you that no longer exist. Let go of dreams that were never truly yours. Let go of habits that numb your truth and identities that guard your vulnerability. This letting go will not always feel empowering. It will often feel like grief, because it is. You are grieving not only what you are releasing, but also the parts of yourself that were never allowed to be. You are mourning years of silence, of betrayal, of forgetting. And this grief, while painful, is holy. It is the soil from which new life grows. Growth is uncomfortable, not because you are doing it wrong, but because you are doing it right. The discomfort is not a sign of danger. It is a signal of expansion. You are stretching into unfamiliar territory, learning to trust your intuition over logic, your feeling over approval, your truth over tradition. This expansion will test you. You will be tempted to return to the safety of the mask, the comfort of the familiar, the ease of playing small. But if you can stay with yourself, with the discomfort, with the truth rising within, you will begin to sense something else. A strength that was never built, but always present. A clarity that doesn't arrive through answers, but through knowing. A peace that doesn't come from control, but from surrender. This is the beginning of true self-mastery. Not mastery over others or circumstances, but mastery of presence, of honesty, of integrity with yourself. You will find that the most courageous thing you can do is not to rise above the pain, but to sit within it long enough to let it shape you into someone truer. And in that becoming, you will realize that the whisper was never leading you away from something. It was calling you home. Chapter 4. The Turning Point. The power of radical honesty. There comes a moment on every journey of transformation when we reach a threshold, a point where the truth can no longer be denied or suppressed, no matter how deeply it has been buried. This threshold is not always dramatic. It may arrive in silence, in an ordinary afternoon, through an unexplainable stillness that settles in your bones. It's the moment you can no longer distract yourself with busyness or explain away your sadness as circumstantial. It's when the outer world continues as normal, yet something inside has fundamentally shifted. The roles, the routines, the beliefs you once wore like armor begin to feel heavy, brittle, and ill-fitting. What once brought comfort now feels suffocating. What once gave meaning now feels mechanical. This is the turning point, the moment where radical honesty becomes not just an option, but a necessity. It is the raw, soul-level decision to stop lying to yourself, to stop pretending that everything is fine when your spirit aches for more, to stop minimizing your pain, your desires, your truth. Radical honesty is not about confession for the sake of drama. It is about revealing the unvarnished truth of your inner experience to yourself, first and foremost. It demands courage because it strips away every excuse, every distraction, every false narrative. It shines a light into the dusty corners of your psyche where denial has built its nest. It is here, in this light, that the journey toward true liberation begins, not through perfection or performance, but through clarity. This clarity is not always comforting, but it is clean. It pierces through the fog of confusion and brings with it a sacred discomfort, the kind that signals the beginning of a deeper integrity. You begin to recognize what is real and what is rehearsed. You start to feel the dissonance between your inner truth and outer expression. And you realize that peace will never come from managing perceptions. It will only emerge from aligning with your authentic self. The moment of choice. At the heart of every transformation lies a choice, not a single dramatic decision, but a series of consistent inner alignments. After the turning point of radical honesty, you are left standing at a crossroads. On one side lies the path of familiarity, safe, predictable, but ultimately stagnant. It offers the illusion of control, the comfort of routine, and the quiet death of your soul's potential. On the other side lies the path of truth, a winding, often uncomfortable journey into the unknown. It does not promise ease or immediate reward, but it holds the possibility of real freedom. This moment of choice is sacred because it is deeply internal. No one else may see it happening. The outside world might remain unchanged, but inside, you are shifting tectonic plates. Choosing truth means stepping into a life where your values are not just words you recite, but the compass you live by. It means leaving behind the narratives that no longer support your growth, even if they've defined your identity for years. This might look like ending a relationship that no longer aligns with who you are becoming. It might mean changing careers, not because you failed, but because you've outgrown the version of you that chose it. Sometimes, it means having conversations that terrify you, because they risk shaking the foundation of your relationships. But the deeper choice is even more personal. It's choosing to stop abandoning yourself, choosing to speak when silence is self-betrayal, choosing to rest when your worth is screaming for more output, choosing to say yes to what excites your soul and no to what drains it. This path is not without its losses, but what you lose are illusions, false identities, outdated roles, borrowed dreams. What you gain is a return to wholeness, and in this return, you discover a strength that doesn't come from force, but from congruence. Your inner and outer worlds begin to align, and in that alignment, you find clarity, not of what's next, but of who you are now. That clarity becomes your compass, the death of the old identity. One of the most profound aspects of the turning point is that it feels like a death, not a literal one. but a psychological and emotional unraveling of who you thought you were. This death is not something we are taught to expect or honor. In our culture, we celebrate beginnings and victories, but rarely do we create space to grieve the loss of an identity that has run its course. And yet, transformation demands it. As you begin to align more closely with your truth, the parts of you that were constructed to please, to perform, to protect, must fall away. These parts are not evil. They were built in love or fear, often to ensure survival in a world that didn't know how to hold your full expression. But now, they become too small for the soul that is emerging. The achiever who was fueled by validation starts to feel exhausted by goals that no longer fulfill. The caregiver who derived identity from being needed begins to question their own unmet needs. The perfectionist starts to notice the cost of their constant vigilance. Letting go of these identities feels like free-falling. There is grief, even panic, as you realize that without these roles, you don't fully know who you are. There is a gap between what has ended and what has not yet begun. This liminal space, the space between stories, is sacred, though it can feel terrifying. It's a period of decomposition before rebirth. And in this space, the invitation is not to rush to redefine yourself, but to sit in the stillness, to allow yourself to feel the weight of what you are releasing and to honor it. This grieving is not regression. It is reverence. It is a gesture of gratitude for the parts of you that helped you survive, even if they now limit your growth. It is in mourning the death of the false self that you create fertile soil for the emergence of the true self. And when you trust this process, you begin to notice that what is emerging is not a new version of you. It is the original you, finally allowed to breathe. Embracing the becoming. After the collapse of the old and the courage of the choice, you enter the space of becoming, not a destination, but a way of being. Becoming is messy, nonlinear, and often invisible to others. It's not marked by sudden transformations, but by subtle shifts. How you speak to yourself in quiet moments, how you move through discomfort without abandoning your center, how you begin to act in alignment with your deepest values rather than external expectations. This stage is not about arriving, it's about embodying. It's where you start to integrate the insights you've gained and live from them, not perfectly, but consciously. You begin to rebuild your life not from ambition or anxiety, but from authenticity. You redefine success not by metrics or milestones, but by meaning. Relationships begin to shift, not because you are cutting people off, but because you are showing up differently, more honest, more grounded, less willing to play small. Some connections deepen, others fade, but each interaction becomes an opportunity to practice presence. In becoming, you learn to trust the unfolding of your path. You no longer need to force clarity. You understand that not every question needs an immediate answer, and not every feeling needs to be fixed. You begin to relate to uncertainty with curiosity instead of fear. Your nervous system begins to unwind from years of being on high alert. This is the turning point. Not a one-time shift, but the beginning of a new relationship with life. A relationship rooted in truth, nourished by integrity, and guided by the quiet, powerful compass of your reclaimed self. Chapter 5. Reclaiming your inner authority. The erosion of self-trust. The loss of inner authority rarely happens in a single moment. It occurs slowly, almost imperceptibly, like the gradual erosion of rock by wind and water. It begins in early life when external voices grow louder than our own, when the hunger for approval or fear of punishment teaches us to question our instincts. The child who once moved freely, intuitively, begins to pause before acting, wondering how their choices will be received. Little by little, self-trust is replaced by self-monitoring. Decisions that were once grounded in inner clarity become filtered through a lens of external validation. Is this right? becomes less about what resonates internally and more about what others might approve of. Over time, we internalize these voices, those of parents, teachers, peers, society, until they merge into an inner critic that mimics the language of fear disguised as wisdom. This voice masquerades as responsible, reasonable, mature, but its underlying tone is control. It tells us to play it safe, to shrink, to comply. It convinces us that our desires are dangerous, our instincts flawed, our knowing unreliable. And so we begin to defer our power to experts, to authorities, to trends and norms. We seek answers in books and gurus, hoping they might give us what we no longer trust ourselves to know. Yet no external voice, no matter how wise or well-intentioned, can replace the authority of your own soul. The erosion of self-trust is not the end of the story. It is merely a detour, one that can be reversed the moment you decide to turn inward and remember who you are beneath the conditioning. Discerning inner wisdom from inner wounding. Reclaiming your inner authority does not mean impulsively following every emotional reaction or desire. It means cultivating the discernment to distinguish between the voice of your wounding and the voice of your wisdom. This discernment is nuanced, developed through presence, patience, and radical self-inquiry. The voice of inner wounding often arises from fear, scarcity, or shame. It's reactive, urgent, and anxious. It speaks in absolutes. You always mess this up. No one cares about what you want. If you don't do this, you'll fail. These messages are rooted in past experiences that taught you survival, not sovereignty. They are echoes of times when being yourself was unsafe or unsupported. On the other hand, the voice of inner wisdom is steady and grounded. It doesn't clamor for attention. It waits. It speaks with calm clarity even when delivering hard truths. This voice does not shame or threaten. It guides. Learning to hear it requires a slowing down, a willingness to sit with discomfort rather than rush to resolve it. When triggered, rather than reacting immediately, pause and ask, is this fear or truth? Is this voice protective or directive? With practice, you begin to notice the difference in texture between the two. Wounding contracts the body. Wisdom expands it. Wounding creates urgency. Wisdom offers spaciousness. As you become more fluent in your own inner language, you begin to choose differently, not from the scripts of your past, but from the truth of your present. This is the foundation of inner authority, knowing that while wounds may whisper, they do not have the final word. You can hear them without obeying them. You can honor their origin without letting them lead your life, rewriting the script of power. For many, the word authority has been tainted by experiences of domination, repression, or rigidity. We associate it with power over, rather than power within. But reclaiming inner authority requires rewriting the script of power entirely. True power is not control. It is congruence. It is the alignment between what you believe, what you feel, and how you act. It is standing rooted in your truth without needing others to agree with it. It is the quiet confidence that comes not from being right, but from being real. This kind of power is not loud or aggressive. It is magnetic. It doesn't demand attention. It commands respect simply by existing in full expression. When you embody inner authority, you no longer need to convince others or prove your worth. You no longer seek approval before making decisions that honor your integrity. This doesn't mean you become inflexible or self-absorbed. In fact, it allows you to become more open and empathetic. Because when you are grounded in your own truth, you no longer feel threatened by the truths of others. Rewriting the script of power also means releasing the belief that you need to have all the answers before taking action. Inner authority is not about certainty. It is about willingness. Willingness to listen, to experiment, to adjust. It is a dynamic relationship with life, one where you are both the author and the student of your journey. Each choice becomes a chance to reinforce your self-trust or weaken it. And every time you honor your truth, even in small ways, you strengthen the neural pathways of sovereignty. You begin to live less from reaction and more from intention. You become the narrator of your own story, rather than a character in someone else's script. Living in alignment with your inner compass. Once inner authority is reclaimed, the journey becomes about daily alignment. Alignment is not a destination. It is a practice. It is a way of being that asks, moment by moment, does this reflect who I am and who I'm becoming? It is the art of living from your center, rather than from the edges of approval or avoidance. This alignment shows up in how you spend your time, how you speak, how you move through conflict, how you choose relationships, how you care for your body. It requires presence. You cannot live in alignment when you are disconnected from yourself. This is why practices that bring you home, meditation, breath work, journaling, nature, are not luxuries. They are necessities. They help you hear the subtle signals of your inner compass and make adjustments before you veer too far off course. Alignment also demands boundaries. You cannot honor your truth while constantly abandoning it to accommodate others. Boundaries are not walls, they are gates. They are the structures that allow your energy, your vision, your voice to flourish. They protect the sacred space of your becoming. Living in alignment is not always comfortable. Sometimes it requires saying no to things that once felt safe. Sometimes it means outgrowing communities, identities, even dreams that no longer resonate. But every act of alignment becomes a declaration. I trust myself. I know who I am. I honor my path. And the more you live from this place, the more life responds in kind. Opportunities align, relationships deepen, synchronicities multiply. You realize that the universe is not punishing or rewarding, it is responding. When you live from your truth, the outer world begins to mirror your inner clarity. This is not magic, it is coherence. And coherence is the heartbeat of inner authority. Chapter 6. Shedding the Layers of Conditioning. Understanding the origins of conditioning. To begin the process of shedding the layers of conditioning, we must first understand where these layers come from and how deeply they embed themselves into our psyche. Conditioning is not merely a product of our environment. It is a complex interplay of cultural, familial, social, and institutional influences that begin to shape us from the moment we draw our first breath. As infants, we are wide open, receptive, instinctive, unapologetically expressive. But very quickly, we learn that certain behaviors are praised while others are punished, that certain emotions are welcomed while others are shamed. These lessons are subtle at first, embedded in tone, in gaze, in silence. They accumulate over years until they form an invisible operating system that governs our choices, our reactions, and even our identities. The messages are rarely explicit, but their impact is profound. Don't cry, be strong. Speak softly, don't take up too much space. You must earn love through performance. These beliefs are absorbed not through direct instruction, but through repetition and emotional charge. And because they are repeated so often, by caregivers, teachers, media, and peers, they begin to feel like truth. They form the scaffolding around our authentic self, molding us into versions that fit into the expectations of others. Over time, we lose sight of where they end and we begin. And yet, even buried under all this conditioning, the real self does not disappear. It waits like a seed in frozen ground, holding its essence in stillness until the thaw of self-awareness begins. Recognizing the cost of staying conditioned. While conditioning may provide temporary safety, its long-term cost is immense. The more we conform to external ideals, the more we lose access to our inner truth. This cost is not always dramatic, but it is deeply erosive. It shows up in the quiet exhaustion of living a life that doesn't feel like your own. It manifests in the dissonance between what you say and what you feel, between how you show up and who you really are. When we are conditioned, we often mistake compliance for connection, achievement for worth, and productivity for purpose. We find ourselves playing roles that no longer fit: people pleaser, martyr, overachiever, not because we truly desire them, but because they once served as strategies for love and belonging. But what once served becomes a prison when it is no longer a choice. You begin to sense this when joy becomes elusive, when anxiety becomes chronic, when your intuition feels distant and muffled. The cost of staying conditioned is not just emotional, it is spiritual. It numbs our capacity for presence, dulls our creativity, and fragments our sense of self. In trying to be everything others wanted, we forget who we were before the world told us who to be. And the longer we stay in that forgetting, the more we rely on distraction, addiction, and overfunctioning to keep from feeling the ache of disconnection. But disconnection, however painful, is also a signal. It is the soul's way of whispering, "This isn't it." It is not a sign of failure, but of readiness. Readiness to remember. Readiness to return. The courage to dismantle false identities. Shedding the layers of conditioning requires courage, not the kind that charges forward without fear, but the quieter kind that dares to sit with discomfort and ask hard questions. It takes courage to examine the identities you've built, especially when they have earned you approval, success, or security. Because even false selves can become familiar, and familiarity has its own seductive gravity. To dismantle these identities is to risk the disorientation of not knowing who you are without them. But within that risk lies the possibility of authenticity. The process begins with awareness, noticing when you say yes while your body says no, when you smile while your heart sinks, when you perform confidence while trembling inside. These are not signs of weakness. They are signals of misalignment. Paying attention to them is an act of self-respect. As you begin to dismantle these roles, grief may arise. You may grieve the years spent living for others, the opportunities missed, the parts of you silenced. You may even grieve relationships that were based on a version of you that was never fully real. But grief is not a punishment. It is a portal. It allows you to release what was never truly yours, and in doing so, create space for what is. It is through this process of release that your true self begins to emerge, not as a perfect or fixed identity, but as a fluid, evolving presence, one that no longer needs to be hidden or contorted to be accepted. This is the essence of deconditioning, not becoming someone new, but becoming who you were before you learned to be someone else. Integrating your unconditioned self into daily life. The final and ongoing phase of shedding conditioning is integration, the slow, intentional weaving of your unconditioned self into the fabric of everyday life. This is not a one-time revelation, but a daily practice. Integration means living your truth, not just understanding it. It means honoring your needs even when it's inconvenient, speaking your truth even when your voice shakes, making choices that align with your values even when they go against the grain. This practice begins in the small moments, choosing rest over hustle, presence over perfection, honesty over harmony. These choices are where integrity is built. They may feel insignificant, but they are the bricks of a life that reflects your soul. Integration also requires boundaries, not as walls to keep people out, but as expressions of what you will and won't allow in your sacred space. It involves saying no without guilt and yes without resentment. It asks you to trust your own timing, to walk at the pace of your spirit rather than the demands of the world. And most importantly, it involves self-compassion. Because as you decondition, you will stumble. You will sometimes revert to old patterns, fall into familiar traps, or question your worth. This is not failure. It is part of the process. What matters is your willingness to return. Again and again, return to your body, to your breath, to your truth. Each return is a homecoming, and over time, these returns become less about correction and more about celebration. You begin to notice moments of peace that are unearned, joy that is unprompted, choices that feel like freedom. You begin to feel not just more yourself, but more whole. Not because you have finally become perfect, but because you have finally become real. This is the gift of shedding conditioning. A life lived not from fear or obligation, but from authenticity and love. Chapter 7. The Sacred Art of Emotional Alchemy. Emotions as sacred messengers. For most of us, emotions have been treated less as sacred messengers and more as unpredictable intrusions, things to manage, suppress, or avoid altogether. From childhood onward, we are subtly and overtly taught which emotions are acceptable and which must be hidden away. And often this conditioning teaches us to fear or reject the very feelings that carry the deepest truths about our needs, values, and wounds. We are praised for being pleasant, punished for being angry, comforted when we cry as long as we stop quickly, and taught to be strong by numbing ourselves rather than facing the tides within. But emotions are not obstacles on the path to growth. They are the path. They are not inconveniences to be fixed, but guides to be followed with reverence. Each emotional state, from joy to grief, from rage to tenderness, carries a coded message from the subconscious, a pulse from the deeper self urging us to pay attention. When you feel anger rise in your chest, it is not a moral failure. It is a flare signaling a boundary crossed, a need unmet, a truth ignored. When sorrow moves like a slow river through your body, it is not weakness. It is evidence of your capacity to feel the weight of loss and love simultaneously. To begin practicing emotional alchemy, you must first unlearn the story that feelings are problems. They are teachers, and in many ways, they are the purest expressions of your aliveness. A life without emotion is a life disconnected from the essence of being. The sacredness lies not in controlling your emotions, but in becoming intimate with them, curious, open, receptive, until you can read their language and respond not from reactivity, but from deep listening. Transmuting emotional energy into insight. Emotional alchemy is the process of transforming raw emotional energy into clarity, wisdom, and embodied truth. It is not about bypassing pain or pretending that difficult feelings don't exist. Rather, it is the art of leaning in, of allowing the energy of emotion to move through the body, mind, and spirit in a way that liberates rather than entraps. Every emotion is energy in motion, E-motion. And when we resist its movement, we trap it within the body where it festers, calcifies, and manifests as anxiety, illness, or emotional numbness. But when we allow emotion to flow, to complete its cycle, something extraordinary happens. The emotion transforms, and with it, so do we. To transmute emotion is to become the alchemist of your inner world. It begins by creating space, a pause, a breath, a moment of non-reaction. In that space, you feel without judgment. You notice the sensations, the textures of the emotion, where it lives in your body, what images or memories arise with it. You ask it questions. What are you here to show me? What truth have I been avoiding? This act of inquiry shifts the relationship from resistance to reverence. The emotion becomes less like a wave crashing down and more like a tide carrying you inward. As you sit with it, not trying to change it, but simply honoring its presence, it begins to unfold its message. The tightness in your chest becomes the voice of your unmet needs. The knot in your stomach reveals your fear of rejection. The tears you held back for years become a river that cleanses the stories of unworthiness. And then, something lifts. The emotion, once acknowledged, moves. It changes form, from heaviness to insight, from tension to release, from confusion to clarity. In this way, emotional alchemy is a bridge from fragmentation to wholeness, from reaction to sovereignty. It is the act of turning the lead of unprocessed feeling into the gold of embodied understanding. The power of feeling fully. The modern world often values detachment, productivity, and rationality over depth, presence, and emotional truth. We are rewarded for compartmentalizing, for staying composed in the face of chaos, for keeping our feelings in check no matter the cost. But this comes at a profound price. When we do not allow ourselves to feel fully, we live half-lives, disconnected, performative, dulled. To feel fully is not indulgence. It is intimacy with your own soul. It is reclaiming your right to experience the full spectrum of being human. It means letting joy erupt through your laughter without needing to apologize. It means allowing grief to wash over you, like a storm when loss breaks your heart. It means welcoming rage as the sacred fire that burns away falseness. Feeling fully is a radical act in a world that urges numbness. It is a return to the body, the breath, the heart. But to feel fully, you must cultivate safety within. For many, the body has become a battlefield, a place where emotions were punished or ignored. Relearning to feel is like learning to breathe underwater. It takes practice, patience, and gentleness. Begin by noticing what feelings you avoid. Trace them to their origin. Ask, when was I first taught that this emotion was dangerous? Then, with compassion, begin to reclaim it. Let the tears come. Let the shaking happen. Let the laughter rise without censorship. As you do, you will notice a shift. The energy that was once trapped begins to flow. The body softens. The mind clears. You become less afraid of yourself. And in that space, you find power. Not the brittle power of control, but the deep power of presence. The more you allow yourself to feel, the more alive you become. And in that aliveness, you find your truest self, not edited, not performed, but real. Becoming the emotional alchemist of your life. Emotional alchemy is not a one-time event. It is a way of living. It is the practice of turning inward with courage, of meeting each feeling as a sacred guest, of learning to navigate life from the inside out. To live as an emotional alchemist is to become the conscious steward of your internal landscape. It means no longer outsourcing your emotional regulation to others, no longer demanding they behave a certain way so you can feel okay. It means owning your triggers as invitations, your reactions as reflections, your patterns as pathways. Each emotional wave becomes an opportunity, not to judge yourself, but to meet yourself more deeply. It is not about perfection. You will still feel overwhelmed, still lash out, still retreat into numbness at times. But with each return to presence, with each breath into the feeling, you reclaim more of your power. You become the one who responds rather than reacts, the one who listens rather than deflects, the one who chooses rather than avoids. This is mastery, not of emotion, but with emotion. Emotional alchemy also allows for greater connection with others. When you are fluent in your own feelings, you become more compassionate toward the feelings of others. You no longer need them to be less emotional for you to be comfortable. You no longer project your unprocessed pain onto them. Instead, you meet them in their humanity because you have met yourself in yours. And through that meeting, deeper intimacy is born. You learn to speak from your truth, to hold space without rescuing, to stay open even in discomfort. Your relationships become more honest, more resilient, more alive. This is the gift of living as an alchemist, not just transforming your own life, but becoming a vessel of transformation for others. You bring light into the dark. You bring breath into what was frozen. You bring love into what was feared, and in doing so, you embody the sacred art of turning pain into wisdom, emotion into medicine, and life into a living altar of truth. Chapter 8: Awakening the Power of the Present Moment. The illusion of time and the disconnection from now time, as we commonly experience it, is not merely a practical framework to organize the events of our lives. It has become a mental prison, a fragmented lens through which we interpret and distort the experience of being alive. From a young age, we are trained to orient ourselves toward either what has already passed or what is yet to come. We are taught to live for the future, exams, jobs, relationships, achievements, as if life itself is a destination, always receding into the horizon. At the same time, we carry the unresolved weight of the past, old wounds, regrets, memories that haunt us quietly, shaping our self-image and informing our every step. In this dual allegiance to past and future, the present moment becomes a ghost, something we pass through without noticing, a fleeting backdrop against which our anxiety and nostalgia play out. We forget that now is the only moment that is ever truly real, the only place where life actually happens. This disconnection from the present is the root of much of our suffering. When we live caught between the regrets of yesterday and the worries of tomorrow, we lose access to the richness of being. We become unconscious in our actions, distracted in our thoughts, and numb in our bodies. We might be physically present, but emotionally and spiritually absent, running on autopilot and wondering why fulfillment eludes us no matter how much we achieve. The illusion of time seduces us into believing that peace, joy, and worthiness exist somewhere other than here. But awakening begins when we see through this illusion and return to the only place where transformation is possible: the present moment. The present moment as portal to the true self. To awaken to the present is to awaken to your true self. For the essence of who you are does not live in the stories of the past or the projections of the future. It lives in your direct, embodied experience of now. This moment, unfiltered and unjudged, is your portal to authenticity, clarity, and peace. The present moment holds everything: the sensations in your body, the rhythm of your breath, the texture of your thoughts, the pulse of your emotions, the sounds in the room, the light falling across your skin. It is a kaleidoscope of ever-unfolding experiences, each one an invitation to be here, fully, without defense. When you begin to anchor into the now, you start to notice the subtlety of life, the way tension rises and falls in your shoulders, how your breath contracts when fear is near, how your chest expands when joy arises. You begin to sense the aliveness within your own being, something that was always present but obscured by mental noise. And in that awareness, a quiet miracle occurs. The ego softens, the mind slows, and the space between stimulus and response expands. In that space, you discover freedom. You are no longer ruled by unconscious reactivity. You can choose. You can respond with intention. You can feel without being overwhelmed. The present moment reveals not just what is happening, but how you relate to what is happening. That awareness is the foundation of all transformation. It allows you to see clearly, to feel honestly, and to act with integrity. The more you root yourself in now, the more aligned you become with your inner truth. Your actions begin to flow from presence rather than performance. Your words become truer, your choices more aligned. You are no longer chasing life, you are living it, moment by sacred moment. Reclaiming presence in a distracted world. In today's hyper-connected, fast-paced world, presence has become a revolutionary act. We live in an age where distraction is both normalized and monetized. Our attention is constantly pulled in 1,000 directions: notifications, deadlines, social media, endless to-do lists. Our minds are rarely still. We are always scrolling, reacting, planning, consuming. This state of perpetual stimulation fragments our awareness and weakens our connection to the here and now. It is no longer enough to understand the value of presence. We must practice reclaiming it, intentionally, repeatedly, and with devotion. Reclaiming presence requires a radical shift in priorities. It means valuing depth over speed, stillness over noise, connection over efficiency. It begins with small, deliberate acts, putting your phone down during a conversation, savoring the taste of your food without rushing, breathing consciously before reacting. These moments, though simple, are sacred. They interrupt the trance of unconscious living and return you to yourself. But presence is not just about attention. It is about embodiment. To be present is to be in your body, not lost in thought or performing for others. It means feeling your feet on the ground, your heart beating, your breath moving. It means making space for silence and letting discomfort surface without rushing to escape it. Presence is not always comfortable, but it is always honest. It reveals the truth of what is, both the beauty and the pain, and gives you the strength to meet it with compassion. In a world that profits from your distraction, presence becomes an act of rebellion. It is how you take your power back. It is how you stop leaking energy into things that do not nourish your soul. And with each moment of presence, you anchor more deeply into the truth of who you are, untouched by the noise. Rooted in the now, awake to the miracle of being alive. Living a life anchored in the now. To live a life anchored in the present moment is not about retreating from the world. It is about engaging with it more deeply, more consciously, more lovingly. It is not a passive experience, but an active choice to bring your whole self into each encounter, each task, each breath. A life lived in the now is one of integrity, because you are no longer divided between what you feel and what you do. You speak more truthfully, love more fully, listen more deeply. You stop rushing to the next thing and start finding meaning in the thing in front of you. This shift changes everything, not just how you feel, but how you relate to others, how you work, how you create, how you heal. Relationships become more authentic because you are present enough to really see and be seen. Work becomes more purposeful because you are not just producing, but expressing. Healing becomes more possible because you are no longer avoiding your wounds, but holding space for them with compassion. Living in the now also invites a deeper trust in life. When you are fully present, you are not trying to control every outcome or predict every turn. You are aligned with the unfolding intelligence of the moment. You begin to experience synchronicities, insights, a sense of guidance that comes not from effort, but from attunement. You become less attached to rigid plans and more open to divine timing. This does not mean passivity. It means responsiveness. You act not from fear, but from clarity. You move not from pressure, but from purpose. And as you live this way, anchored in presence, guided by inner wisdom, you discover a deeper rhythm, a more natural pace, a quieter joy. You begin to trust the now as enough. You realize that every moment, no matter how ordinary, holds the potential for awakening. And in that realization, life ceases to be something you endure or escape. It becomes something you inhabit. Fully, freely, authentically. Chapter 9, Embodying Inner Stillness Amid Chaos, the Illusion of Control in a Turbulent World. In a world that seems to spin faster with each passing moment, the human psyche yearns for a sense of control, a foothold amidst the endless change and unpredictability. We cling to routines, outcomes, relationships, even identities, as if they could insulate us from the chaos that is an inescapable part of the human experience. We design lives based on predictability and construct expectations that, when unmet, produce waves of frustration, anxiety, and disappointment. Yet, the very act of trying to control life's uncontrollable nature generates the very stress we attempt to avoid. Life, by its essence, is dynamic, often unpredictable, and frequently indifferent to our personal timelines or desires. The weather shifts without warning, people leave without explanation, careers evolve, bodies age, accidents occur, and the world continues to turn regardless of our intentions. This truth, though unsettling at first, holds within it a paradoxical liberation. When we acknowledge that external control is an illusion, we begin to redirect our energy inward, toward the only domain that is ever truly within our reach, our inner state. The storm outside may rage, but if we can find calm within, we are no longer at the mercy of external circumstances. True mastery begins not with conquering the world, but with befriending the silence at the center of our being. In that sacred stillness, unshaken by noise or distraction, we remember that peace is not found by making life easier. It is found by becoming still enough to see clearly through the storm. The practice of cultivating inner stillness. Inner stillness is not a passive state, nor a void of emotion or thought. It is an embodied awareness, a grounded presence that remains intact even when the mind is busy or the heart is tender. It is the calm at the bottom of the ocean, unperturbed by the surface waves. Cultivating this stillness requires more than momentary meditation or a few deep breaths. It is a daily, deliberate practice of returning home to yourself. It begins with creating space, not just in your schedule, but in your awareness. Space to pause before reacting, to breathe before speaking, to observe rather than absorb. In these moments of pause, you begin to notice the constant background noise of your thoughts, the emotional residue clinging to your body, the ways your nervous system flares in response to subtle triggers. Through mindfulness, breath work, or simply sitting in silence, you learn to observe without judgment, to witness the inner movements without being swept away by them. This witnessing state is the gateway to stillness. It doesn't demand that you stop thinking or feeling. It invites you to no longer identify with every thought or be controlled by every feeling. Like clouds passing through a vast sky, your internal experiences come and go, but the sky remains. That sky is your awareness, your essence, your unshakable self. As you strengthen this awareness, you notice that stillness is not a destination. It is a return to what has always been present beneath the noise. And with each return, you deepen your resilience. You become less reactive, more compassionate, more intuitive. You begin to respond to life from a place of grounded clarity rather than panic or haste. Inner stillness becomes a sanctuary, not because the world has changed, but because you have. Chaos as a catalyst for presence. Contrary to the belief that chaos must be avoided to find peace, the truth is often the opposite. Chaos can be a sacred teacher, a crucible in which we refine our capacity to remain present. The swirling energies of uncertainty, disruption, and change carry within them the potential to awaken us more fully to life. When everything familiar is stripped away, when the plans unravel, and the ground beneath us shakes, we are invited to step into deeper presence, not out of luxury, but out of necessity. In such moments, the mind often scrambles for control, reaching for old stories, frantic conclusions, and blame. But the deeper invitation is to stay, to meet the moment exactly as it is without trying to escape or edit it. Chaos, in its raw form, strips us of the illusions we hide behind. It asks us to let go, not of responsibility, but of resistance. And in that surrender, presence arises like a lighthouse in the storm. The key is not to suppress the discomfort, but to lean into it with awareness. The pounding heart, the racing thoughts, the tension in your shoulders, all become doorways into your own aliveness. The more you can stay present with the discomfort without collapsing into it or pushing it away, the more you discover an inner spaciousness that can hold it all. This spaciousness is not fragile. It is forged through your willingness to remain conscious in the face of intensity. The more you practice this presence in chaos, the more you become a safe container, not just for yourself, but for others. You become the calm in the room, the steady hand, the grounded voice. This is not about perfection or becoming emotionless. It's about rootedness, about being so deeply anchored in your inner stillness that the chaos no longer defines you. Instead, it refines you. Living as a beacon of stillness. To embody inner stillness in daily life is not to retreat from the world, but to show up in it more fully, more awake, more compassionate. It is to become a presence that soothes rather than adds to the noise, that holds space rather than fills it, that listens deeply rather than simply waits to speak. Living as a beacon of stillness does not require you to be always calm or unfazed by life's challenges. It requires you to remain anchored in your self-awareness, even when waves of emotion or disruption arise. You become someone who responds rather than reacts, who moves with intention rather than compulsion. Your stillness becomes a frequency others can feel, a silent reassurance that no matter what is happening outside, peace is still possible inside. This kind of presence changes rooms, heals conversations, softens conflict. It allows others to drop their guard because you are no longer projecting urgency or judgment. But embodying this stillness requires ongoing devotion. It means saying no to unnecessary noise, to drama, to false urgency. It means cultivating boundaries that protect your peace without closing your heart. It means honoring your own nervous system, resting when you are depleted, breathing through tension, moving at a pace that respects your rhythm rather than chasing the world's tempo. You begin to redefine success, not as how much you do, but how deeply you inhabit what you do. You measure your day not by productivity, but by presence. In this way, stillness is not an accessory to a meaningful life. It becomes its foundation. You no longer seek the next high, the next win, the next validation. You are not chasing a life, you are inhabiting it. Fully, peacefully, powerfully. And in doing so, you give others silent permission to do the same. You become a mirror that reflects what is possible when one dares to be still in a world that never stops moving. A living invitation to come home, to slow down, to remember the sanctuary within. Chapter 10. Boundaries as acts of self-respect. Redefining boundaries, not walls, but bridges to authenticity. Many people recoil at the word boundaries, associating it with coldness, rejection, or a shutting out of others. But boundaries, when rooted in self-awareness and compassion, are not walls of separation. They are bridges to authenticity. They define where you end and where another begins, not to divide, but to honor the sacred space of individuality. Boundaries are not tools of control. They are declarations of value, clear signals to the world of what is welcome in your life and what is not. To set a boundary is to say, I respect myself enough to protect my time, energy, and emotional well-being. In doing so, you also extend an invitation to others to engage with you in a way that is conscious, respectful, and aligned. Without boundaries, we lose ourselves in the needs and emotions of others. We say yes when we mean no, absorb what isn't ours, and perform roles that no longer reflect who we truly are. We become distorted reflections of expectations, constantly bending to maintain peace or please others while eroding the core of our identity. But the act of setting a boundary is not a declaration of war. It is an act of radical self-respect. It is standing in the truth of your worth and recognizing that your presence, your energy, your life force is not a limitless resource to be given indiscriminately. It requires courage to draw that line, especially when the world around you has grown accustomed to your compliance. Yet, in reclaiming your boundaries, you begin to return to yourself. You no longer shapeshift to fit someone else's mold. You stand as you are, anchored in your truth, and allow your relationships, commitments, and expressions to flow from that solid ground. The energetic cost of porous living without clear boundaries, is like leaving the doors of your home open all day and night. Anyone or anything can walk in, rearrange your space, and leave chaos in their wake. You may not see the damage immediately, but over time, the emotional clutter accumulates. You find yourself exhausted for no clear reason, irritable without understanding why, stretched thin by the invisible weight of unspoken expectations. You become a container for everyone else's projections, pain, and responsibilities, losing sight of your own needs in the process. This porous living slowly siphons your energy, eroding your emotional stability and sense of self. You say yes out of guilt, tolerate disrespect out of fear of confrontation, and remain silent when your inner self screams for space. You carry what isn't yours, internalize moods and demands that do not belong to you, and forget the contours of your own desires. The energetic cost is not just emotional, it becomes physical, manifesting as fatigue, anxiety, even illness. Your nervous system, perpetually on alert, begins to fray under the constant bombardment of stimuli that you've not filtered or named. Reclaiming boundaries begins by recognizing these subtle drains and tracing them to their source. Where are you giving away your presence too easily? Where have you allowed the expectations of others to override your own clarity? As you ask these questions, you begin to see the invisible leaks that have slowly eroded your vitality. Repairing them requires presence, honesty, and commitment. You start saying no without explanation. You allow others to feel disappointed without rushing to rescue them. You prioritize your inner harmony over external approval. And as you do, you begin to refill, not just your energy, but your sense of agency. You move from depletion to wholeness, from reaction to intention. You no longer live at the mercy of others. You choose your life consciously, one boundary at a time. Boundaries as invitations to deeper relationships. Though it may seem counterintuitive, boundaries don't distance us from others. They bring us closer. By clarifying our limits, we allow others to know the truth of who we are. We stop pretending, performing, or pleasing, and instead show up as our whole selves, flaws, preferences, sensitivities, and all. This authenticity, while it may initially unsettle relationships, built on unspoken compromise, ultimately creates space for real intimacy. When both people in a relationship are aware of their limits and express them clearly, trust begins to flourish. There is no guessing, no silent resentment building beneath the surface. Instead, there is clarity, mutual respect, and a shared understanding of each person's needs and responsibilities. Healthy boundaries in love, friendship, or work are not about keeping score or enforcing rigid rules. They are fluid agreements based on self-awareness and honest communication. They allow room for vulnerability because they establish safety. You can express your truth without fear of being punished. You can receive someone else's truth without taking it personally. The boundary becomes a container for deep connection, not a barricade. But this shift requires us to break free from old patterns. The fear of abandonment, the desire to be liked at any cost, the belief that love must come through sacrifice. We must learn to let go of relationships that only survive through our self-erasure. Sometimes, in setting a boundary, we will lose people. But we must trust that what we lose is not love. It is the illusion of connection built on our silence. And what remains, or what arrives in its place, is far more honest, more resonant, more nourishing. When we operate from self-respect, we draw in relationships that reflect that same respect. We become magnetic to authenticity, not because we demand it from others, but because we embody it ourselves. The daily practice of boundary making. Boundary making is not a one-time event. It is a continuous, daily practice of listening inward and responding outward with clarity. It requires you to check in with yourself consistently. How do you feel in this interaction? Are you overextending? Are you abandoning your truth to keep the peace? Each moment becomes an opportunity to affirm your alignment or to course correct. The practice is nuanced. It's not always about saying no. Sometimes it's about saying yes more intentionally, but only when that yes comes from a full-hearted place, not a coerced one. It may mean limiting time with people who drain you, even if they don't mean harm. It could look like turning off your phone after a certain hour, claiming rest without apology. It may involve confronting someone kindly, but firmly, asserting your needs without aggression or guilt. These micro-boundaries, when practiced daily, begin to restructure your entire life. They create a rhythm that honors your well-being, and the more you practice, the more intuitive it becomes. At first, boundary setting may feel awkward, especially if you've been conditioned to people-please or self-sacrifice. You might second-guess yourself, feel guilty, or worry about how others will perceive you. But over time, that discomfort gives way to empowerment. You begin to realize that each boundary is a vote for your wholeness, a step closer to reclaiming your life. You start noticing the spaciousness that arises when you are not constantly overreaching. You breathe deeper. You sleep better. You feel safer in your own body. You begin to live not out of obligation, but out of choice. You don't disappear in service to others. You serve from a place of fullness, and in doing so, you become a lighthouse, not a lifeboat. You stop rescuing and start radiating. You live with integrity. And perhaps most importantly, you send a powerful message to the world. I matter. My needs matter. My truth matters. This is not selfishness. This is sacred stewardship of your own soul. Chapter 11. Mastering Emotional Alchemy. Emotions as messengers, not enemies. Most people move through life attempting to control, suppress, or outmaneuver their emotions. They are seen as unpredictable, inconvenient, or even dangerous, something to manage rather than embrace. Yet the truth is, emotions are not your enemies. They are messengers, sacred indicators that something within your internal landscape is seeking acknowledgement. To master emotional alchemy, you must first dismantle the belief that emotions are irrational or burdensome. They are deeply intelligent, encoded signals arising from the body's wisdom and your soul's desire to be known. Anger, for example, is not merely rage. It is the cry of violated boundaries or unmet needs. Sadness is not weakness. It is the grief of loss, the longing for connection, or the reverence of something once cherished. Fear is not cowardice. It is an alert system pointing to vulnerability or the edge of growth. Each emotion carries within it a specific frequency, an invitation to pause, to feel, to listen. When you begin to see emotions not as disruptions, but as doorways to deeper truths, everything changes. You no longer fear your inner world. You become curious about it. You stop numbing or escaping and begin exploring. In this shift, you cultivate a profound intimacy with yourself. Emotional alchemy begins in that moment of turning toward rather than away, of softening into your own heart rather than tightening against it. And like any alchemical process, it requires patience, reverence, and trust. The raw material of emotion, whether grief, shame, or joy, can be transformed into insight, resilience, and wisdom when you allow it to be felt fully and met with presence. The art of emotional presence. To practice emotional alchemy is to become present with your emotions in their rawest, most unfiltered form, not analyzing them, not fixing them, but simply being with them. It's about cultivating a sacred space within where your feelings can unfold safely, without judgment or urgency. Emotional presence is not the same as indulgence. It is not wallowing or dramatizing. It is quiet, attentive witnessing. It's placing your awareness in the center of your body, your chest, your gut, your throat, and listening to what resides there without commentary. This practice is deceptively simple, but profoundly transformative. When you sit with anger without reacting, you uncover the wound beneath the fire. When you hold space for grief without rushing to feel better, you allow your heart to expand rather than contract. When you stay with fear long enough, it often reveals not a danger, but a threshold, a gateway to your next becoming. The modern world teaches us to bypass our emotions through distractions, achievements, or spiritual bypassing, but true mastery lies in the willingness to feel everything. Emotions that are not felt become embedded, stored in the tissues, woven into our behaviors, projected onto others. But emotions that are acknowledged dissolve their charge. They complete their cycle. They move through us like weather patterns, stormy perhaps, but not permanent. Through presence, the intensity of an emotion becomes the portal to transformation. It stops owning you, and instead, you come into relationship with it. Over time, you build trust in yourself. Not because you control your feelings, but because you allow them without losing your center. You become an alchemist, transforming raw emotion into deeper embodiment, deeper truth. Transmuting emotional energy into power. Once you have learned to sit with your emotions without flinching, a new power emerges. The capacity to transmute that emotional energy into aligned action, creative expression, and expanded awareness. This is the heart of emotional alchemy. Not to remain in emotional loops, but to transform them into something generative. Imagine anger not as a force to repress, but as fuel for boundary setting or social justice. Imagine grief not as paralysis, but as the fertile ground for compassion, poetry, or human connection. When you stop seeing emotions as problems and start treating them as raw energy, you reclaim a deep well of vitality that was previously trapped. Emotions are life force. They are movement, breath, fire. What drains us is not the feeling itself, but the resistance to feeling. When you allow your sadness to move through your body as tears, breath, sound, or journaling, you free up your energy for creativity, for clarity, for intimacy. When you give rage a safe, conscious outlet through dance, expression, movement, you recover your assertiveness, your inner fire. When you welcome joy without fear of it disappearing, you begin to feel more alive, more available to life's full spectrum. The alchemical shift is in recognizing that emotions don't make you weak or unstable. They make you human, whole, and awake. The more you integrate your emotional life, the less reactive you become. You stop lashing out or shutting down. You begin choosing your response from a grounded place, with awareness. This is emotional sovereignty, not the absence of emotion, but the ability to navigate it with wisdom and presence. You become a conscious vessel, not a reactive container. And from that state, your emotions become allies, guides, even oracles, showing you what matters, what needs healing, and what wants to be born through you. Emotional intelligence as a spiritual path. There is a profound spiritual dimension to emotional mastery that is often overlooked. We tend to think of spiritual growth as transcendence, rising above the human messiness. But true spirituality is not escape. It is embodiment. It is descending into your own emotional terrain with love and presence and meeting yourself there again and again. Emotional intelligence, then, is not merely a psychological skill. It is a sacred practice. To be emotionally intelligent is to walk through life with an open heart, even when it aches. It is to hold yourself and others with compassion, even when you're triggered. It is to sense the undercurrents in a conversation, the unsaid feelings behind words, the pain beneath the anger. It is attunement, not just to others, but to your own inner child, your unmet needs, your buried grief. Each moment you choose to feel instead of flee, you build spiritual muscle. You develop the capacity to stay with life, to meet reality as it is, not as you wish it to be. You stop seeking enlightenment as a destination and begin living it as a daily devotion, through your tears, your tenderness, your fierce boundaries. Emotional intelligence is what allows your inner growth to translate into outer compassion. It is what makes your presence healing to others, not because you have all the answers, but because you are safe to feel with. Your heart becomes a sanctuary, not just for yourself, but for everyone you touch. And in this way, emotional alchemy becomes not just a personal practice, but a collective offering. You become a beacon, showing others what it looks like to live with feeling, with truth, with soul. You model wholeness in a fragmented world. You become the medicine. Chapter 12. Living with intentionality. The power of deliberate living. In a world driven by immediacy and distraction, it is easy to drift through life on autopilot, responding to the needs of the moment rather than steering with purpose. Living with intentionality requires the courage to step out of this passive existence and claim authorship over your life. It begins with a deep pause, an interruption of unconscious momentum. In that pause, you begin to question, why do I do what I do? Who is choosing this? Is this action, decision, or relationship aligned with my deepest values? These are not superficial queries. They are portals into a life lived with precision, presence, and power. When you live intentionally, every choice becomes a thread in a larger tapestry, woven with awareness. Even small actions, what you eat, how you speak, where you place your attention, take on a sacred significance. You begin to understand that your life is a creation, not a reaction. Intentional living is not about perfection. It is about alignment. It is about the ongoing practice of returning to what matters, again and again with devotion. This kind of living demands self-knowledge. You must know who you are becoming and what you are no longer willing to tolerate. It is not a path for the faint of heart, but it is the path to true sovereignty. With each intentional choice, you reclaim energy from the forces that once dictated your life. External expectations, inherited narratives, cultural scripts, and reinvest it in your soul's unique design. You stop leaking time and presence into obligations that don't nourish you. You begin building a life that reflects your essence, not your conditioning. In this way, intentionality becomes a radical act of self-respect and a daily ceremony of remembrance. Aligning actions with core values. To live intentionally is to align your outer life with your inner truth. This means that your decisions, behaviors, and goals are guided not by what is popular, easy, or expected, but by your core values, the principles that define who you are at your most authentic. Identifying these values is both an excavation and a liberation. You must dig beneath the surface of your identity to uncover what truly matters. Perhaps it is freedom, integrity, creativity, connection, or service. Once you name these values, they become your inner compass, steering you through both clarity and chaos. The power of alignment is subtle but profound. When your actions mirror your values, there is a congruence that produces peace and vitality. You feel whole. You move through life with coherence. When misaligned, however, when you say yes to what feels like a no, when you prioritize external success over inner truth, you create tension within your psyche. You may experience burnout, resentment, or emptiness, not because you are broken, but because you are living out of alignment. The remedy is not to do more, but to pause and realign. Ask yourself before each commitment, does this reflect who I want to be? Does it honor what I value most? Over time, these questions become second nature. Your life becomes a reflection of your inner convictions, and you stop seeking validation because you are living in integrity. Alignment does not always mean ease. Sometimes it requires hard choices, leaving jobs, ending relationships, redefining your identity. But the clarity it brings is worth the discomfort. It is through alignment that you create a life that feels like yours, not a performance. It is how you turn intentions into embodied reality and live not by accident, but by design. Cultivating daily rituals of intention. Intentional living is not a one-time decision. It is a daily practice, and one of the most powerful tools for sustaining it is ritual. Unlike habits, which are often mindless repetitions, rituals are imbued with meaning. They are deliberate acts that anchor you in presence and purpose. Morning rituals, for instance, set the tone for your entire day. Whether it's journaling, meditating, walking in silence, or simply breathing with awareness before you speak to the world, these practices become sacred openings into conscious living. They remind you that how you begin matters. Similarly, evening rituals, like reviewing your day, expressing gratitude, or preparing for rest with intention, create closure and integration. Rituals are not about rigid routines. They are about bringing reverence to the ordinary. Drinking tea becomes a meditation. Lighting a candle becomes an invocation. Even mundane tasks like washing dishes or folding clothes can become acts of mindfulness when approached with intention. Over time, these rituals build a rhythm of consciousness. They become touchstones in a world of noise, grounding you in what is real. More importantly, they become mirrors of your devotion to yourself. When you create time for stillness, reflection, and embodiment, you send a clear message to your nervous system. I am worthy of care. I am choosing presence. In a society that glorifies speed and multitasking, ritual is rebellion. It is a way of reclaiming your time, your energy, your sovereignty. Through these small daily acts, you create a life that is not only lived, but felt, rich, rooted, and awake. The ripple effect of intentional living. When you begin living with intention, the impact does not stop with you. It ripples outward, subtly transforming your relationships, your environment, and even your presence in the collective. You begin to affect the world, not through force, but through frequency. People feel the difference in your energy. You are no longer scattered or reactive. You are anchored, discerning, awake. Your choices reflect inner clarity, and this clarity becomes contagious. In a world hungry for authenticity, your intentionality becomes a beacon. It models a new way of being, one that is slow, conscious, rooted in value, and resistant to the pressures of conformity. You may find that others begin to soften around you, to open, to reflect. This is the quiet power of intentional living. It creates resonance. Your presence begins to speak louder than your words. And yet, this ripple is not just interpersonal, it is systemic. Imagine a world where leaders led with intention, where communities organized around shared values, where families prioritized presence over performance. It begins with one person, one choice, one moment of awareness. This is how revolutions begin, not always with noise, but with deep, sustained attention to what truly matters. Living with intention is not self-centered. It is generative. It creates space for others to do the same. When you are no longer enslaved by urgency, you give others permission to slow down. When you live aligned with your truth, you give others permission to seek theirs. You become part of a collective shift, a movement toward more soulful, embodied, meaningful living. And in doing so, your life becomes more than a personal journey. It becomes a quiet revolution. Chapter 13. Reclaiming Inner Authority, Dismantling External Validation. For most of our lives, we are conditioned to look outward for guidance. From early childhood, we are taught to seek approval from parents, praise from teachers, and later, validation from bosses. peers, partners, and even strangers. We learn to measure our worth by how well we meet expectations, how many accolades we receive, or how seamlessly we fit into society's mold. This external orientation slowly severs us from our own intuitive knowing, our own truth. We begin to doubt ourselves, deferring our decisions to the authority of others, forgetting that we were born with an inner compass as precise and trustworthy as any map. The longer we live by the rules of others, the more dissonance we feel inside. A dull ache, a chronic fatigue, a sense of emptiness even in the face of success. Reclaiming inner authority begins by recognizing the cost of this conditioning. It requires a courageous confrontation with the places in our lives where we have outsourced our power. This dismantling is not an act of rebellion for rebellion's sake, but a reclamation of self-responsibility. When you stop looking outside yourself for permission, when you begin to honor your own voice over the noise, you reclaim the sacred role of being your own guide. This doesn't mean rejecting all external wisdom. It means holding it up to your inner truth and making discerning choices that resonate with your soul, not just your ego. Inner authority is not loud or forceful. It is quiet, grounded, and consistent. It doesn't seek to dominate others, but to lead oneself with clarity. In a world where many are desperate to be told what to do, reclaiming your inner authority is an act of profound liberation, trusting intuition as a compass. One of the greatest aspects of reclaiming inner authority is the rediscovery and trust in one's own intuition. Intuition is not a mystical ability granted to a select few. It is a natural faculty within all of us, though often neglected or dismissed in favor of logic, analysis, and societal directives. In truth, intuition is the language of the soul, the subtle nudge, the visceral knowing that transcends explanation. It whispers rather than shouts, and in a world obsessed with certainty and proof, it is often ignored. But when you begin to honor intuition as a valid, trustworthy guide, a profound shift occurs in how you navigate life. You begin to sense when something is right or off, when a person's words mask hidden intentions, or when an opportunity aligns with your deeper path. The key to strengthening this compass is presence, creating quiet spaces in your day where you can actually hear the whisper beneath the noise. Meditation, walking in nature, journaling, and solitude all become tools for tuning into this wisdom. Over time, you start to notice patterns. The gut feeling that saved you from a toxic job, the dream that revealed an overlooked truth, the sudden clarity that arose in stillness. Intuition becomes not just a backup plan, but a primary tool for decision-making. This does not discount logic, rather, it integrates it. You become a whole being, thinking, feeling, sensing. Trusting intuition requires courage because it often goes against the grain. It may ask you to say no when everyone expects a yes. It may urge you to leap when others advise caution. But each time you honor it, you strengthen your inner authority and deepen your relationship with yourself. Life begins to feel less chaotic and more guided. You stop fearing the unknown because you've developed an unshakable trust in your ability to respond wisely. Boundaries as expressions of inner power. To fully reclaim your inner authority, you must become skilled in the art of boundaries. Contrary to popular belief, boundaries are not about pushing others away or erecting walls. They are declarations of self-worth. They articulate what you will and will not allow, what honors your energy and what depletes it. When you lack clear boundaries, you invite confusion, resentment, and burnout into your life. You say yes when you mean no, tolerate behaviors that harm you, and shrink to accommodate others' expectations. This erosion of self is subtle but cumulative. It leaves you feeling unmoored, unsure of who you are outside the roles you play. But when you begin to assert boundaries from a place of love, for yourself and others, you draw a line that protects your inner clarity. This act is both brave and necessary. It requires you to become intimately aware of your own needs, limits, and rhythms. It asks you to communicate with honesty, to disappoint others in order to stay loyal to yourself, and to risk rejection for the sake of integrity. Boundaries are not ultimatums, they are offerings of truth. They allow relationships to be built on mutual respect rather than silent sacrifice. They teach others how to treat you by how you treat yourself. More importantly, they create the spaciousness necessary for inner authority to flourish. You are no longer swayed by guilt, fear, or manipulation because you stand rooted in what you know is right for you. Setting and maintaining boundaries is not always comfortable, especially if you've spent your life pleasing others. But every time you honor a boundary, you reinforce the message: I am enough. I am sovereign. I choose myself, not at the expense of others, but in alignment with my truth. Embodying self-leadership in daily life. Reclaiming inner authority is not a philosophical idea. It must be embodied through daily self-leadership. This means taking responsibility for your choices, regulating your emotional responses, and navigating challenges with grounded presence. Self-leadership is the practice of being the adult in your own life, the one who shows up, tells the truth, and makes choices that serve long-term growth over short-term comfort. It is not about control, but stewardship. It asks, how do I lead myself when no one is watching? How do I show up in moments of discomfort, uncertainty, or failure? Embodying self-leadership requires radical honesty. You must be willing to see where you are sabotaging yourself, where you are blaming others instead of taking ownership, and where fear is disguising itself as logic. It also requires compassion, the kind that allows you to hold yourself accountable without shame. Each day becomes a field of practice. When you're triggered, self-leadership invites you to pause before reacting, to ask what you're truly feeling and what you truly need. When you face decisions, it reminds you to consult your inner compass before seeking external advice. When you encounter failure, it teaches you to mine it for wisdom rather than weaponize it against yourself. This kind of leadership is not flashy. It doesn't need applause. It is quiet, consistent, and profoundly powerful. Over time, you stop waiting for life to give you permission to act. You stop needing others to rescue, approve, or fix you. You begin to trust that you have what it takes to navigate whatever comes your way. And this is perhaps the most liberating truth of all, that you do not need to be ruled by your past, your fear, or your conditioning. You are capable of leading yourself with grace, clarity, and strength. Your life becomes a mirror of this inner leadership, not perfect, but intentional, alive, and true. Chapter 14. Becoming the master of your life. Integration, bridging the inner and outer worlds. Mastery is not a destination marked by perfection or achievement, but a state of deep alignment between the inner and outer realms of your existence. It is the moment when your values, beliefs, choices, and behaviors begin to form a coherent and embodied whole. For many, the personal development journey remains partial, as insights gained in quiet reflection fail to translate into action in the real world. Mastery, however, demands integration. It calls you to bring your insights into your relationships, your creativity, your vocation, your presence. The inner work, the excavation of wounds, the reclamation of power, the nurturing of truth, must now shape the outer architecture of your life. Who you are in solitude must reflect who you are under pressure. This process begins with intention. Each day becomes a canvas on which you paint your truth, not through grand gestures, but in the choices you make, the boundaries you honor, and the energy you bring into every interaction. Integration is not a one-time act, but an ongoing weaving of the sacred into the mundane. It requires vigilance because the pull of unconsciousness is constant. It asks you to pause before responding, to check if your actions are aligned with your inner knowing, to be ruthless in eliminating what dilutes your authenticity. Mastery is born in these moments, not in what you know, but in what you embody. It's the courage to walk into a room and remain centered, even when the world demands you shrink. It's the grace to act with kindness when triggered, the discipline to speak your truth without armor, the wisdom to rest when others push forward. Mastery bridges the gap between what is true and what is lived, creating a life that is not only authentic, but deeply impactful. Mastering energy, not just time. Most people attempt to master their lives by mastering time, managing schedules, increasing productivity, and optimizing every second. But true mastery lies not in controlling the clock, but in stewarding your energy. Energy is the currency of presence, the force that animates your actions and intentions. When your energy is fragmented, even the most perfectly structured day yields little fulfillment. But when your energy is coherent, clear, focused, and aligned, time expands. Mastery asks you to become acutely aware of what drains and what nourishes you. This begins with your inner terrain. What thoughts are you entertaining? What emotions are you suppressing? What stories are you clinging to that siphon your vitality? Your mind can be either a source of clarity or a vortex of exhaustion. Through practices like meditation, breathwork, and conscious movement, you learn to clear the noise, to recharge from within, to become the generator of your own energetic state rather than a reactor to external chaos. Equally vital is discerning where your energy goes in the outer world. Who receives your attention? What habits consume your focus? Are you investing in what expands you, or indulging in what numbs you? Mastery demands the courage to audit your energy allocation. It invites you to unplug from the unessential, to walk away from the draining, to move toward the regenerative. This includes your physical body, the temple through which your energy flows. Nourishing foods, restorative sleep, mindful movement, and deep rest are not luxuries. They are prerequisites for sustainable mastery. When you learn to master energy, you become magnetic, not just productive. You move with intention rather than haste. You create from overflow rather than depletion. Your presence becomes a transmission, felt, respected, remembered. The quality of your energy, more than your words or achievements, becomes your signature in the world, creating from wholeness, not wounds. To be the master of your life, you must learn to create not from the places you've been hurt, but from the depths of who you've become. Most people unconsciously create from wounds, the desire to prove their worth, to gain approval, to avoid abandonment. Their ambitions, relationships, and even spiritual practices become strategies to fill inner voids. But creation from wounds is reactive. It lacks sustainability and breeds disillusionment. True mastery requires a shift into wholeness, a recognition that you are already complete, already worthy, already enough. When you no longer seek to fix yourself through achievement or validation, your creations become offerings rather than cries for help. This doesn't mean you deny your pain. It means you transmute it. You turn your wounds into wisdom, your trauma into teaching, your shadows into light. Wholeness does not mean perfection. It means integration. It's the willingness to meet every part of yourself with compassion, to recognize that your flaws are not failures, but invitations to deeper truth. From this space, you create because you are inspired, not because you are insecure. Your work becomes an expression of your essence, not a performance for approval. Your relationships become spaces for intimacy, not arenas for validation. Your goals become aligned with purpose, not propelled by fear. Mastery invites you to check the source of your actions. Are you chasing or expressing? Are you proving or offering? Are you escaping or engaging? When you create from wholeness, you shift from survival to sovereignty. You become less attached to outcomes because your worth is no longer on the line. You begin to trust the process, to find joy in the doing, to witness life unfolding through you rather than being forced by you. This kind of creation is powerful, magnetic, and healing, not just for you, but for everyone it touches. Living legacy, becoming the lighthouse. At the pinnacle of mastery, the question is no longer, what can I get, but what can I give? Your life becomes less about accumulation and more about contribution, not out of obligation, but out of overflow. You have filled your own cup to the brim, and now it spills into the world, not with martyrdom, but with grace. This is the moment you become a lighthouse, not by forcing others to change, but by standing so fully in your truth that it lights the way. You no longer shrink for the comfort of others, nor do you inflate to gain their praise. You simply are, steady, radiant, unshakable. Your very being becomes a teaching. The way you walk through grief, the way you honor your boundaries, the way you hold yourself with compassion, all of it becomes medicine for those still searching. This is your living legacy. It's not the titles you collect or the wealth you amass, but the frequency you leave behind. People may forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel in your presence. Legacy is not reserved for the elite. It's created in everyday moments. The kindness you extend to a stranger, the authenticity you bring to a conversation, the courage you embody in your choices. Mastery invites you to see every interaction as an opportunity to transmit your values. Are you living as an embodiment of your highest truth? Or are you compromising for comfort? Are you cultivating spaces where others can be free? Or are you unconsciously perpetuating the chains you've just escaped? To be a lighthouse is not to be perfect. It is to be authentic. It is to radiate without demanding. It is to shine even when the storm rages. You do not chase ships. You remain rooted and visible. In this final chapter, you realize mastery is not a peak, but a practice, a daily devotion to truth, alignment, and presence. You become less concerned with being seen and more devoted to seeing clearly. You trust yourself. You lead yourself. You live with intention. And in doing so, you become the master of your life, not by controlling everything, but by aligning with what is most true. Your journey no longer seeks arrival, for you have arrived in yourself, for yourself, as yourself. Chapter 15. Living as your true self. A new way of being, integration, beyond the breakthrough. When the dust of transformation settles, when the breakthroughs fade into memory, when the emotional waves still and you're left standing in the quiet, this is where the real work begins. Not in the moments of revelation, but in the daily, deliberate choice to live in alignment with your true self. Integration is not glamorous. It does not always feel like fireworks or epiphanies. It often shows up in the mundane, choosing silence over distraction, honesty over comfort, presence over performance. It's in the subtle yet seismic shift where your identity no longer comes from survival patterns, but from soul truth. This is the chapter where the echo of every inner excavation becomes the rhythm of your life, where what once felt like new awareness becomes your new normal. You begin to realize that reclaiming your true self wasn't a moment. It was a return, remembrance. And now that you remember, you cannot unknow it. You cannot slip back into unconscious patterns without noticing the dissonance. The lies no longer sit well. The masks feel heavier. The roles you once played so effortlessly now feel foreign, tight, suffocating. This discomfort is not regression. It's a sign of awakening. Integration is the sacred act of embodying everything you've learned again and again until your outer world begins to reflect the inner wholeness you've claimed. And this quiet, grounded, unapologetic wholeness is where the true self lives. Embodying wholeness in everyday life. To live as your true self is to show up rooted, not reactive, present, not performative, alive, not automated. But wholeness isn't just a feeling, it's a practice, one cultivated moment by moment, choice by choice. You start to notice how your nervous system responds to chaos, not by shrinking, but by pausing. You witness your thoughts before they spiral. You catch yourself mid-pattern and choose differently. That is embodiment. It doesn't mean perfection. It means presence. It means responding to life from your core, not your conditioning. And that presence bleeds into everything. How you speak, how you love, how you listen, how you rest. It reshapes your habits, your home, your calendar, your conversations. You start honoring your energy instead of exploiting it. You stop seeking external validation because internal alignment becomes enough. And from that place, relationships shift. Some will deepen, others will fall away. Both are sacred. You no longer hold on to what's not meant for you out of guilt, fear, or obligation. You let go with love. And in that space, new energy enters. More aligned, more nourishing, more true. The world begins to reflect back the clarity you've cultivated inside. You live lighter, not because life got easier, but because you're no longer carrying what was never yours to hold. Wholeness isn't something you chase, it's something you come home to. And the more you choose it, the more natural it becomes. Courage, boundaries, and authentic expression. Living as your true self will require courage. Daily, gritty, quiet courage. The kind that speaks the truth even when your voice shakes. The kind that walks away from what's familiar when it no longer feels aligned. The kind that holds boundaries not to push people away, but to protect your peace. Courage is not loud. It doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's the whisper that says, "No more," or "Not this time," or "I'm choosing me now." When you stop abandoning yourself for the comfort of others, you disrupt patterns generations deep. You become a chain breaker, a pattern interrupter. And yes, that will shake things. It will trigger discomfort in you and in those around you. But the discomfort is a doorway. Every time you choose truth over people-pleasing, you strengthen your trust in yourself. Every time you express from your essence, not your ego, you create space for deeper, more authentic connection. Expression becomes sacred. It's no longer about being heard to be validated, but about letting your truth breathe in the open, and those who are meant to hear it will. Boundaries become acts of self-respect, not walls, but gates. Not selfishness, but self-honor. And in that honoring, your life begins to mirror your inner worth. The world may not always celebrate your authenticity, but it will respect it. And more importantly, you will. That is the gift. That is the liberation. Becoming a lighthouse for others. When you begin to live as your true self, you don't just heal yourself, you light the path for others. You become a lighthouse in a world drowning in performance, perfection, and pretense. Not because you preach or force or convert, but because your presence speaks louder than words. People feel safe in your clarity. They feel inspired by your integrity. They begin to question their own masks, their own patterns, their own performative lives. And that ripple is the revolution. We heal in relationship. We grow in community. Your reclamation is not in isolation. It becomes a living transmission, a silent permission slip that says, "It's safe to be real here." You don't need to be a coach, teacher, or leader to do this. You simply need to be you, fully, freely, fiercely. That authenticity radiates. It teaches by being. And yes, some will resist it. Not everyone is ready to meet their own truth. But those who are, they will find you. And together you begin to create a new paradigm. One where honesty is sacred, where depth is normal, where masks fall and hearts open, where people don't just survive, they thrive. And it all begins with one person brave enough to go first. That person is you. You are not just reclaiming your true self for you. You are reclaiming it for your lineage, for your community, for the world that desperately needs more truth, more love, more realness. The journey continues. This may be the final chapter of this audiobook, but it is not the end. In truth, it is only the beginning, because living as your true self is not a destination. It is a devotion, a living, breathing commitment to alignment every single day. You will falter, you will forget, you will fall back into old patterns. That is not failure. It is part of the path. What matters is not perfection. What matters is that you return. Again and again you return. To your breath, to your body, to your truth. Each return is a victory. Each return is a recalibration. Over time, the true self becomes your home frequency, the steady hum beneath the chaos, the compass that guides you when the world spins fast and loud. You will keep growing. You will keep shedding. You will keep evolving. And as you do, you will continue to remember more of who you are, not because you were incomplete, but because life will keep offering you mirrors, invitations, and opportunities to deepen your embodiment. The tools in this audiobook are yours now. Use them. Return to the chapters when you need them. Let the words meet you again from this new version of yourself. Let your journal continue the dialogue. Let your life become the reflection of everything you've remembered here. Because you were never broken. You were never lost. You were simply becoming. And now, you've arrived, not at an end, but at a beginning. A beginning where you no longer seek yourself in the world because you found yourself within. A beginning where you walk with your head high, not out of ego,